Hello. We have some people joining. I'm just waiting for Jan and Brian to join. Hey guys. Hey Jan. How's it
Hey,
going?
good, good. Okay, this is my first time using this, so
Oh my goodness. Welcome to Kumu. It's a pretty fun
must
experience,
be a
right?
right. Must be a generation thing. I don't know.
Good morning. How is it?
Good Good evening. It's good. So I'm getting familiar with how it works now. So it's really cool.
Yeah, people can give virtual gifts. We have all sorts of people joining. Rui has just joined. He has an amazing VIP animation. Oh my goodness. So I saw the list of questions. We're going to have some fun chatting through. I'll talk through some of the background of how I moved to Southeast Asia, how I ended up joining GoJek, and then what those early days were like. So I'm excited.
Cool.
Hey, Rui. Thank you. So is Brian or anyone else going to be joining us on stage?
I don't know if Brian can join. A couple of folks might not be able to join because it's work hours,
Technically,
but
yes,
uh,
but
but we'll
we're all
definitely post
working
a
remotely.
recording, right?
Yes,
But we'll definitely
exactly.
post a recording. Yeah.
Sounds good.
So So I'm going to introduce a little bit product page in the beginning when we start at,
Sure.
in 8 minutes, and then I'll hand it off to you. Maybe ask you first with your journey and all that, and to introduce yourself.
Okay. Sounds good. And then when
Cool.
we get to the point of Q&A, people can actually just go up on stage and ask their questions, or they can type it into the chat if we want to just read it from there.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Sounds good?
And to go on
Awesome.
stage, they just click on one of
They
the
just click on one of
spaces
the
here, right?
tiles. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly
All
like you
right.
did.
Very good. Very cool.
Exactly. So we'll give everyone a couple of minutes to start. I wish we could play like lobby music or something here.
Right.
Yeah, technically, I could.
Just out of curiosity, is there a way like to create polls or anything like that here, or
It is
no?
all live streaming,
Other
so unfortunately, there is no pausing in live streaming. But if anyone
or
has
no?
any questions,
Or
I'm
polls,
sorry.
like voting, like being able to vote in real
Oh,
time.
polls
Yeah.
and voting. That's a
Yeah.
really good question. I believe there is. I'm really bad at the all of the features while I'm live, though. If we had someone moderating, I think it would be much easier. So you could definitely vote. People can definitely vote with virtual gifts. I like that idea.
Hmm.
We also often
Okay.
do things like press one if you would like us to answer questions about Kumu, stuff like that.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. Okay. That's cool. Okay. So there's settings
Let me also
here.
send you the link so that
Campaigns.
people can share the URL.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Chat gifts. Oh, okay. Here's the virtual gifts.
So people can just join that URL that I dropped to you in Messenger, and they'll go directly to this room. Oh my goodness, diamond showers! That is my favorite VG. My favorite virtual gift is definitely the diamond shower.
Oh, nice. All right. Okay. Let me.
It's the most outrageous and
Okay.
beautiful, so definitely love when people use it. I wish I could be dropping gifts while I'm live. That's actually half the fun.
Okay.
So I'm
Let me
sure we'll have a
post.
bunch of new
Post.
people joining today since a lot of the product PH team, maybe our community might not have a Kumu app. So we'll give everyone a few seconds, well, a few minutes to join. Where are you based right now, Jan?
So I'm based in Manila, and so it's a bit rainy
Mm.
here. So you might
Oh my
hear a
goodness.
little bit
Yes, what
of the
part?
rain. So I'm based in so I live east of Manila. It's Cainta, which is like one of the surrounding I guess province east of
Provinces, yeah.
Manila. Yeah.
Hopefully it's not flooding too badly there.
Yeah, it's well, hopefully. I mean, it started to flood like a couple of days ago because it's been raining nonstop, so it's been really bad. Some areas have been badly hit, but I hear
Yeah.
like the storm has moved up. I think it's now in China or something like that. Because I heard from a friend that in Shanghai that's like rains are
Yes.
torrential.
Yep. I checked in on our teammates who are also in China. Luckily, they haven't been hit by anything too bad.
Right. What's the weather like there? You're in San Francisco, right?
I'm
The Bay
actually in
Area.
Hawaii right now.
Oh, you're in
Um,
Hawaii. Wow.
did you know Tagalog is actually the second most popular language here after English?
Yeah, I heard. Yeah, lots of Filipinos.
So I'll randomly ask my Lyft driver, do you know Kumu? And they'll be like, I know Kumu. So that's been
Oh,
really cool
wow.
to just like randomly run into people who are like, oh, I know Kumu. You don't need to explain it to me. That's been really neat.
That's cool. That's very
This
good.
is so Hawaii is the closest to the Filipino time zone that I can get to right now, given how crazy the world is right now without quarantining for like 4 weeks. So
Right,
working from the
right.
Philippines, I think right now it's about 4 p.m. In San Francisco, it would be 7 p.m. So I'm definitely
7,
glad
yeah.
to be working earlier.
Right. Plus, the weather is beautiful in
It
Hawaii, right? So
is. It
not too bad.
reminds me of Southeast Asia. I actually really miss being in Indonesia and Singapore. I like warmer weather much more than what San Francisco was. In SF, you have to bring a jacket everywhere. It changes all the time. Um, but in Indonesia, it was always very consistent. So that was nice.
Right. Other than it's consistently raining and warm. That's
That's
basically it.
true. Yes. Consistently very
Just to,
humid, very warm.
right, right.
Oh, we
So
have
that's
Jay in the house. We have Andrew. We've got Wise. We also have a lot of
nice.
Kumu product folks. So if people have
Oh, very
any
good.
suggestions on how to improve the app, drop a comment in the chat. I actually forgot that I had put that as my bio. And so when I enter people's live streams, they would like click on my mini profile and they would read, tell me if you have feedback on Kumu. I have feedback. And I was like, now I can't like sneak into live streams anymore. People now know that I'm working with Kumu. So I can no
Right.
longer creep up on people and do user research, what every product manager should be doing, which is literally just going into live streams and saying, so how did you guys meet each other? Did you all meet on Kumu? What do you use Kumu for? So no longer can I sneak into live streams unless I use my Fumu account.
Well, at least you get a lot of, I'm sure, feature requests and bug reports.
I'm actually hoping to get more. Yeah. Hi, Sandy. We're about hitting 4 p.m., I guess 10 a.m. PH time. Do you want to kick us off, Jen?
Right, sure. Absolutely. So, okay. So I think, so how many people now do we have online?
It says we've got 23
Is
people,
there a
24.
23? Okay, great. Oh, there. Okay, I see it now. Okay, 25 people. So, all right. Okay, so let's kick it off. So, again, thank you everyone for joining. I know this is not our usual time for our product page meetups, but this is a very special session we have, of course, with Crystal, who is the new CPO of Kumu. Kumu, of course, we're using Kumu is the a fast growing tech startup from the Philippines. A rocket ship, one of our success stories coming out of the Philippines. So really, really happy to have Crystal on board, and of course, many members of her team also joining us today. So, of course, Product Page. If you don't know about Product Page, we're a community of product managers in the Philippines. We have a Facebook group. We have more than 2,700 members now. We have a website, productpage.org, and of course, a YouTube channel where you can see and some of the past recordings we've done, especially during the pandemic, of some of our sessions with some product leaders and product managers. So this session is all about Crystal. So let's get right into it. So Crystal, our topic for today is all about because many of our members are actually working for startups, and a few, I would say, just a few are working for a fast growing startup or transitioning to scale up, such as Kumu. So we really want to hear about your experience. But before we go into that, maybe you can share a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you became a product leader at Kumu.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you again for having me. It's so nice to meet more of the product community, especially in the Philippines. When I first moved to Indonesia, the tech community was pretty nascent. It was probably around the same state that in the Philippines it is today. But I do know that we grew really rapidly thanks to the success of companies like GoJek and many others in Indonesia. So definitely hoping to see that meteoric rise in the communities in the Philippines as well. So, a little bit about me. If you haven't met me before, hello, it's super nice to meet you. Hi, Alex. I'm going to shout out all our VIPs because it's just so fun to do. I very rarely get to live stream like this. So, I'm Crystal, currently the CPO at Kumu, which is a Chief Product Officer. What that means is I like to collect all of your bug and feature requests and make sure that what we're building is something that people really want. And I think I'm going to come back to this time and time again. Build stuff that people want, solve problems that people have. Before Kumu, during the pandemic, like many others, I had mild suffering. I know everyone has been suffering through this pandemic period, but I was half unemployed. I was advising a handful of startups, Kumu included, but also companies like Meet with Spot, ADP List in design, Clora, a B2B health recruitment app, and a couple of others. And what I ended up doing was a mix of data, growth, and product. And I think that in the product space, we're starting to mature in the types of different roles that people have. So I'll touch upon the different types of product management roles there are in a little bit. While I was advising, I was also an executive in residence, EIR, at Reforge, which is some of honestly the best content in product strategy that I've ever seen. Oh my goodness, hello teaming. Um, there's some amazing companies like Seedly, who I love talking to co-founders as well. So at Reforge, I was teaching advanced growth strategy, which is essentially talking through how do you grow your company through a product-led lens, and how do you essentially think through all of the different moving pieces from acquisition to habit loops to engagement to reactivation and retention, all of the different pieces that you might teams you actually want to start considering as part of your growth model within your company. So this is one of the things that I was teaching for the fall cohort at Reforge. Before that, I was at GoJek. So I was at GoJek for 5 years, 5 very long years. It felt like forever. And so for everyone who's at that startup to scale up phase right now, press one if it feels both like a lifetime and also like a week ago that you just started working on a project. I know that I've constantly felt that way whenever I was working on starting from joining the data team, which was not a team at all, but just me, working on fraud and risk. It was just me and the co-founder, team of two. And then working on internal portals. We replaced an entire tech team. I was working on our driver and finance portals, performance marketing, and then eventually worked on growth, which is what we consider a lot of the product work today, which then let me kind of help move the company to one of more organizational stability. After 3 acquisitions, GoJek had 2 head of HRs, 2 VP of sales, 3 different merchant heads. And so you can imagine all of the organizational debt that accumulates when you are going startup to scale up. So I'll touch a little bit on that as well. Before GoJek, I actually grew up in San Jose and San Francisco. My parents, weren't super tech forward, but I happen to live in an ecosystem where you would see, yes, the 408 San Jose East Side. I would see like pink mustaches on cars, and I would say, what is this? Why are people doing this with their cars? Oh my God, you can download an app and order a taxi. I was actually like doing it the old-fashioned way, where I would either have to drive my dad, who would travel to work, I would drive him to the airport, or we'd have to literally call a taxi company. So just seeing that world emerge around me was enough to make me curious enough to just research what are these companies and what are they doing. I also had the benefit of actually being part of a investment bank that was really focused on the mobile, what we called wireless back then. This is very much dating me. Wireless startups, which were really just mobile apps focused on things from food delivery to a company called Summon, which was literally Uber before Uber even had payments integrated, and many more. So the pattern of what I learned here, though, was that there are a pretty clear set of metrics that you need to care about if you want your company to succeed. And those common metrics were things around retention at the very top, organic growth, which meant how do you acquire and activate your customers, and how do you keep them within your platform if you needed to reach out to them again. And of course, level of engagement. There are these different levels of engagement. It's never a 0 to 1 thing. Oh my God, thank you, Tessa. So I really loved being able to be in an ecosystem where you had to move quickly, understand if something was a competitor or competitive. There are very different formulas to consider. And how do you react to how the consumer base needs are changing, emerging markets, emerging use cases, and how do you sequence all of this together? So I've always been really fascinated at how much of product seems very simple. It's, again, coming back to solve people's problems, build something that people want, but how you exactly do that, there are lots of different strategies. So I've learned a lot of those the hard way at GoJek. Hopefully we'll apply more of those learnings at Kumu, and not make as many mistakes, but definitely have made a ton of mistakes within my life cycle at GoJek.
Right. So that's very fascinating. So I imagine. So you said when you joined, it was basically you and the co-founder. You were building these internal portals and all of that. So maybe kind of share a little bit. Like so those were the early days. How did that? Like what were the other problems you were solving at the time, and how did that change, or did it change when you started?
Yeah,
Scaling up and growing faster.
good question. So let me describe the state of the union when I joined GoJek. It was maybe 12 engineers. They had kicked out the executive team from the one meeting room in the office because they said, everyone's too loud. We need a quiet place to focus. So we're like, take the meeting room. There was about 20 or 30 product engineering, product design, research folks who were just starting to scale our logistics platform. Food delivery was just starting. GoMart was our grocery delivery service was just being planned, and then we had transportation. So starting at this point, we were at about 40,000 orders per day, and it was slowly growing. We didn't have too much competition. Grab had maybe just started entering the market just the week that I joined. And what we were really focused on was just understanding the business, because it was growing so fast, we weren't sure what was actually happening anymore. We had a lot of this qualitative research. The app kind of sucked. In fact, I remember the first day that I used our app, I was trying to go pick up my laptop from a store, and I didn't realize that you can't actually move our PIN on the transportation app to a specific store. It would just land you in the middle of a street. So when the driver like turned around, he was like, which place do you want to go to? I was like, isn't it on the map? I don't know where I'm going. So there are all of these like poor product experiences that obviously exist when you first start out. And Justin Boley here knows exactly what I'm talking about because he was ex-Grab. We're friends now. And when I first started, though, the team didn't have any data resources. So I was asking, how are we sending out management reports? And I would find out, oh, it's this IT guy who is randomly typing in the SQL query, running it every day. exporting it and emailing it to someone in the finance team. And I was looking at the numbers. I was like, these don't seem right because some of these numbers keep changing day after day. Things like number of new customers, total completed orders. And they're like, yeah, there's like a 1 to 5% difference. We don't really know why. And so I would continue investigating. And the way I had to do that as the first data hire was literally sit next to the engineers and like go through the code base with them. So I'd go through their Java code, the Android code, the Swift code. I don't know, we have Swift back then, but on the iOS side, I would ask, at what point in time does this transaction get recorded to the database? What types of metrics should we care about? And I really had to prioritize. I know everyone here is probably thinking like, I have a million problems. I know I need to do this, but which one do I do first? And honestly, it comes down to, if you're a marketplace, you need to understand supply, demand, and marketplace efficiency. If you're any other transactional company, you really need to understand your funnel. How many people start the transaction process? How many people actually go and buy the thing? How many people make it to a complete successful purchase? So everyone who perhaps is in more complicated experiences, well, there's a whole other set of metrics to understand there. But in the early days, it was really focusing on just that marketplace experience. So we would look at how many drivers do we have on the platform, number of customers, what is the allocation rate, in what areas geographically are we not doing quite as well as others. And one of my key product strategies here is to always look at the extremes. Where are you doing incredibly well, and where are you doing incredibly poorly? Because that might tell you either it's a segmentation problem where certain types of users do well, certain areas, certain methods of payment or experience or service, and you start to build your internal tacit knowledge, essentially what's all the intuition that's in your head. And so I'll think of a kind of mental framework called search and inference theory, which I'm very fond of. It's essentially Bayesian updating, or your own internal mental models of how you understand how does the physics of the company work. And if you know some of the inputs, then you start building out that physics understanding. And as the environment changes, whether that's outside of the platform or product changes that you've made, you need to update how the physics works. And that doesn't mean that all of the physics goes out the window. It means you like look for the one isolated thing that you need to change, one variable, you update that mental model. So starting off, you mentioned, working on driver portals, customer portals. So it was actually, I can almost draw like an exact line through the different things that I worked on. And they were all based on what was the biggest fire that is burning today. We didn't do a lot of work on stability until we had time to breathe. And I think in a real scale up, that's okay. I don't think, though, that most companies are really a scale up. I think most companies think they are growing modestly with time to grow, and they do need to get fundamentals right. But GoJek was in a situation where literally, I think week over week, we were growing 20% for a sustained 5-6 months. And I remember being tired. When Donald Trump would say things like, "You'll be so tired of winning," I was like, I get that. I'm actually tired with how often we keep hitting milestones and how often people keep celebrating things, because I know we're so far from done. We've created so much technical debt, so much infrastructure debt, organizational debt. So when you first get access to all the data, I essentially looked at what are the critical problems. We don't have enough drivers. Okay, we need to onboard more drivers. That insight needs to be sent to the team on clear, actionable items of, when we have this many drivers in this set location, radius of 5 kilometers, this is how our product performs. If you want the product to perform differently, 20% higher in acceptance rates or whatever it may be, it needs to be 10x more drivers in this specific area. So getting really actionable, I think, is the most important part of any data team. Finding that insight, that most meaningful insight that is simple enough to be communicated, that people understand and can act on, and disseminating that to the right party. So the team would go and work on acquisition. Then it was, if you have access to all the data, you realize how much fraud might be in the system. And so we'd find drivers doing impossible things on the GoJek platform. Things like they're doing 100 transportation rides per day. And I don't know. Well, yes, the Philippines knows how bad traffic is.
Yeah, that would
Imagine
be
that in
possible.
Indonesia.
Right.
And it's impossible. Like, you can't do 100 trips in a day. And so we'd say, well, clearly there are some people abusing the platform and we should fix that. So then I would work on fraud, but the way that we worked on it was not, let's build a super polished fraud platform with automated rule sets and crazy admin portals. It was literally, let's partner with the CTO, write a really quick script, upload it to one of our servers. A cron job will execute it every hour, and that's it. That was our fraud solution, and we wrapped that up in like 3 days. So I think it was understanding what's a burning fire versus what is something that you need to stem the bleeding so that you can move and work on something else that's way more important. So once you work on fraud, you kill the fraud that's in the ecosystem, you then move on to the next thing. Well, why do we have all this fraud? It's because the admin team doesn't have a portal from which they can actually fix stuff. Aw, thanks NYC. Thanks Wise. And without the team having proper tooling, then you really cannot scale. So starting to kind of mix and match, stop the fire a little bit, put on some brakes so that there's something to build off of, but keep that leverage moving up, because customer expectations are constantly growing. If you're not growing your consumer experience, you're actually losing. You're losing by just trying to keep up. And I think that was the key part of the early days at GoJek.
Right. Well, let's go back a little bit, like in the early days of GoJek and in the startup days, because a lot of our people in the audience are mostly working in startups, not yet scale up stage. And for some of the things I've heard from some of the product managers I've talked to was that when you're in an early stage company, unlike a scale up company, you don't have that much data to work with in the beginning, right? You're not able to discern trends. You're not able to. It's hard to find like actionable insights yet. So it's hard for them to kind of have a framework on what should we do first. Like, I mean, it's easy to look at the burning problems, but do you think that at that early stage they should think about, besides the burning problems, which are obviously need to be solved, like what things, is it too early to think about like things that they can optimize so that they avoid debt, technical debt later on, or avoid operational debt or things like that?
Thanks, Nathan. That's a good question. I do think most people care too much about over optimization when they don't have product market fit. I think if you don't have customers clamoring for more, you don't have people who are constantly on the app, if you don't have people who are constantly telling you that there are bugs that are annoying, you don't have product market fit yet. So you actually want people to be complaining. That's a strong signal of product market fit, is that they want it to be better. And in the case where you don't have enough data, you actually need to do user research. You need to talk to your users. And it's insane how many product managers haven't talked to their users. So I know there's a lot of product people in here, but honestly, if you haven't talked to a user in the past 2 weeks, that's a problem. Especially early on, because you don't have enough data. What you need to do is you need to talk to 5 customers in week 1. You need to talk to 5 different customers in week 2. And what ends up happening is you're starting to get a set of trends. You start to hear what are the patterns, because what data really gives you is specificity. Data tells you specifically what part of a funnel are people having trouble with. It tells you which type of customers are not using the app. But talking to customers and asking them about their experiences, why they don't choose you, that gives you trends. And the more data points you get, the more specific in understanding those trends you get. But the trends don't generally change.
Right. Okay. So let's say now the company is becoming more successful. You're getting a lot more. You've reached product market fit. You're getting a lot of feedback from customers. I mean, at what point? So I remember a quote. I think Paul Graham said that in the early stages you can do things that don't necessarily scale. You can kind of Wizard of Oz kind of You can kind of
Exactly.
do things manually in the background, but at what point is that doable? Like, do you want to do that like when you start growing very fast? At what point can you get away with kind of a Wizard of Oz type of operation in the back end?
I actually think that not enough people do Wizard of Oz experiments. I will tell you, GoJek did Wizard of Oz stuff even at millions of monthly users. So, one example, we wanted to test out subscriptions. And so, I don't have a subscription feature on GoJek, but I also don't really know whether or not people want this. And so, what we ended up doing was we said, well, we have a voucher service, we have coupons that let you get a free ride. What if we just sold these or used these to mimic a subscription experience? So we added like 100 drivers to a WhatsApp group. Terrible idea, never doing that again. And we basically just told them, we were like, we're going to ask you guys to sell these subscriptions. You're part of a special beta program, you're testing us, some new features for us. So for every ride that you get in the next week, text us if this customer tells you that they will buy a subscription package from you. Here's what you need to tell them. They'll get 15 free rides per month. It's 100,000. They'll give you the cash. And what we'll do is when you WhatsApp us, we'll go in remember, our finance portal that we now have, and we'll actually deduct 100K from the driver wallet. We'll then go to our voucher portal and we'll just add manually the vouchers to the customer that the driver is currently on a ride with. That was the subscription experience. Very Wizard of
Yeah,
Oz. And we
right.
were able to launch this in, I think, a day and a half of thinking about it. We were able to get a clear signal of what percent of the customers that these drivers got access to actually ended up buying. How did the customers use the subscription package? What might the breakage be like? Because there's nothing better than actual real data of your product feature. And so the faster you can get signal, the better your insights, the better you'll learn about whether or not you should build this, in what ways you need to build it, what common questions to answer. And I do think that not enough companies take this Wizard of Oz route. I think you want to start thinking of the proper platforms that as a product team you can leverage over and over again, that you can reuse as your repertoire, because we only get so many release cycles. Maybe in web and backend it's less of a problem, but in mobile apps especially, you get 24 shots at a new app. If you're doing 2-week releases, that means every release is sacred. So anything that you can release that doesn't take up time to a release cycle, doesn't take up developer time, I would do it that way. And in Southeast Asia, I think culturally, we are all extremely creative. We've always had to make do with much less. People have always underestimated what we can do. And I think I take that as a challenge. I think we should always try to create experiences that people would have taken months to create in an equal fashion.
So let's talk more about that. Like, you talked about Southeast Asia, and right now there's very limited like success stories, right? Like Gojek, obviously one of them, Grab another, Grab and Tokopedia now. But why do you think like Southeast Asia has been kind of there's not yet, especially like here in the Philippines, not yet a lot of success stories, and how do you think Southeast Asia or maybe the Philippines or Indonesia is different from, let's say, markets in the US and growing a company or product here?
It's a good question. I think specifically for the Philippines, I was also wondering this a lot. Why is it so rare, so exciting for a Filipino-born company to emerge as the winner in the Philippines region? And I think it comes down to how easy is it for other companies to try to use the Philippines as a testing ground. It speaks a lot of English. There isn't a ton of friction in having to localize the app. And I think that does us a disservice in the Philippines. It means that it's hard for local players to get an edge and to basically take over the market and have a head start. Whereas in Indonesia, if you tried to localize in English, it was going to be very challenging. You would have to have Indonesian, especially for the driver apps and the experiences there. But I do think that our countries are often looked at as opportunities because they're bigger than others, but they tend to think of localization as a side project. They don't understand that there's millions more people here that they should be designing for, that they need to be listening to. And it is hard. I understand it's hard for them to be talking to users. I find it hard even sometimes to talk to our users because I'll start asking them things and they'll be like, I don't speak English that well, so I'll answer you in Tagalog. And I'll be like, that was really not something I could understand. So it's hard for sure.
Right.
And like Louis said, there aren't a lot of product managers here. It is a very new, nascent product experience, product industry, wherein we are borrowing insights from the US. They have their own biases. We have to build this ourselves. So we're doing twice the
Right.
work. We are building a product and we're building our own actual industry at the same time. And that's incredibly hard. And in GoJek
Right.
especially, I remember trying to hire and some of our recruiters, saying, oh, let's make, some of the requirements be they need to have had experience in Golang for the past year, even though it just came out. They need to have experience working at scale. And then we would look at this JD and we'd say, that's impossible. No one here has ever
Right.
worked on products at scale. We are literally the biggest company here. And so to find people who have done it before is way harder. It's impossible in many cases if you want to hire locally. And what that meant was that at places like GoJek, we'd have to invest very heavily into our teams, partnering them with people who were experts but were not owning the execution because they couldn't possibly understand the level of nuance and experiences that our users cared about locally unless they moved there. So I think we just have a crazy, insurmountable challenge. We have way more scale than the US. We don't have as
Right.
much talent, quote unquote, that has experience with the stuff that we have at our scale. And 3, there are competitors left and right trying to enter the market as side projects. So many challenges. I think, though, that persistence will let us rise above that and that we'll be able to capture that market soon.
Right. So that's interesting. You made a good insight about localization, like in places like Indonesia. So you obviously have barriers to entry. If let's say a foreign player were to enter the market, it would be harder for them to enter because of things like language and things like that. And but it also happens in the reverse. Let's say in the Philippines, Kumu is fairly successful. But how easy would it be, you think, for a company like Kumu to take its business model, take the product to other countries in the region? And what do you think would you want to have to think about then?
So I think the Philippines is actually in a very unique position. 10% of the GDP of the Philippines is from OFWs, overseas foreign workers. We are by default an international country, which means that we have literally seeds within every country of importance. Every country that has wealth, that has the means to be a paying user. That's something that we should be thinking about more opportunistically. How do you, starting from a local player, start to reach out and identify the OFWs, the people who care about supporting a local player. And honestly, this is much easier on a social app like Kumu. But I was just saying earlier before we started that I was randomly asking my Lyft driver in Hawaii whether he knew Kumu. And he's like, I know Kumu. Kumu's great. My family uses it overseas. And so the fact that people already know about companies like Kumu in many other countries is huge. It gives us a clear advantage, any company in the Philippines, to actually go international because we speak English already. There's a huge experience around OFWs wanting to be a part of their culture back home, wanting to feel connected. And so I don't think that there's much stopping us beyond real focus on that problem statement and that user type and getting the talent to focus and build on the things that those types of users would need. Oh, thanks,
But
GP.
at what point, like you Kumu can target the Filipino diaspora. I mean, there's a lot of Filipinos abroad, and that's all. I mean, the Philippines plus the Filipinos living abroad is itself a huge enough market. But at some point, are you guys already thinking about making Kumu? I mean, going beyond the Filipino audience and also trying to win, let's say, an American audience or an Indonesian audience or a Vietnamese audience? And
Good
what do you
question.
think you would need to do that?
I think we need to do a lot of things differently. But I know a lot of people here are probably from the Philippines product PH group. But if you are not, can you type in the chat where you're from? If you're not in the Philippines right now, where are you? I'd love to see that in the chat. And you'll probably see there's a ton of people who are not in the Philippines right now. There's people in LA, Singapore. Like,
Singapore.
we already have amazing people internationally, San Diego, Kuala Lumpur, and the time zones are again like not advantageous at this specific time, but I'm sure that if we were even later at night, you would see way more people. Aw, thanks, Ron. That's great. Bhutan, like we have so many international users. But I think what we really need to focus on is how can we be the number one app for Filipinos, no matter where you are. No matter where you are, your culture is always what ties you to home. And I felt that as an Indonesian living in the US, growing up there. When I went back to Indonesia, it was clear, like all of my family is here. This is the place that I care about the most. And to be able to bring something like that to the Philippines, I think Roland and Rexy are amazing founders of Kumu, and they have such a clear desire to improve things for the Filipino community. And I'm very bought into that mission. I don't think we need to think about going international to other cultures, other regions, until we really capture Filipinos no matter where they are.
Hmm. Maybe to kind of look at it more broadly and make it like applicable to other people in the audience working for other companies. Like, at what point do you? I mean, what sorts of things do you need to think about before you? Because a lot of people are saying when you're a startup, focus on one market, solve that problem for a particular market or market segment before you move on to other adjacent markets or other problems. But at what point, let's say, did GoJek or maybe Kumu will want to say, okay, we've solved this problem for this market, and it's now time to expand and look at
Yeah.
other adjacent markets. Like, at what point, what are the things you want to think about before you want to make that
Yeah.
decision?
So product market fit expansion is one of my favorite topics on product. So I have a lot to say on this, but I'll start out with GoJek never thought very consciously about expansion beyond thinking our platform is a driver on two wheels, and they deliver things, money, and people. That's it. Anything with two wheels and those three things. And I think product market fit expansion, when done well, is like having a head start. It's like starting on like I don't know what the Monopoly board is. It's like starting on Boardwalk when you're playing Monopoly, because you already have this foundation of either suppliers, users, or use cases that clearly are adjacent to yours to move into the next problem statement. And so with GoJek, when we were doing our logistics service, we didn't have GoFood yet. But when I looked at the data and literally, again, called customers, we saw these anomalies of, again, the extremes. Who's using logistics a lot? And we would call that phone number that was set for the pickup. And the person who answered was like, hello, this is a fried banana stand. What would you like? And I was like, this is bizarre. This is supposed to be a package delivery service, and they're using it to deliver food because they don't want to drive and drop off their delivery orders. And so we basically said, okay, well, how can we be 10x better than the competitor on day one? And the way to do that was, one, supply. You have to have faster delivery times than the competitor. And two, coverage. And so the supply of menus was something we could pretty easily do because we already had a fleet of drivers who were already going into restaurants. And one thing that we were able to do was just ask them, if you're near a restaurant right now, could you go in really quickly, snap a picture of the menu, send it back to us? And we did this for weeks with an admin team manually typing in SKUs, restaurants, addresses, one by one. And to the point where we now have more restaurants on our platform than I think at the time it was like Zomato and maybe Food Panda. And eventually they actually had to kill their operations in Indonesia because they couldn't compete. They weren't operating from a platform of leverage. And so with the day one of GoFood going live, it grew 30% week over week for months again. And I think product market fit expansion leverages something you already have or basically build on top of something that is adjacent to your user base, or in this case,
Mm.
your supply. You can get them to do something that's just as easy as what they were doing before with one extra step. And that's what I mean by adjacent. When you're doing product market fit expansion, adjacent means it's right next to it. It doesn't mean you pivot like 4 different variables in your market playbook and you try to win an entirely new category or new user base. You change one of those variables. For us, it was we have drivers, they drive around, they pick stuff up. What if they weren't people? What if it was food instead? And that equation really stuck. And it's why we had to kill things like the Go Life experience, because from the user's perspective, they were thinking of GoJek as a brand that had a driver who gave you something. And so when we had Go Massage, people would literally ask questions like, is a driver going to come to my house and give me a massage? I'm not sure that I want that. And you can imagine that doesn't make sense in those experiences to move to an adjacent market like that. So I think there's a lot that we learned evolving the adjacent markets and product market fit expansion. But I think we ended up, when I left, 27 verticals, and I had just built out the third-party platform, which is the WeChat model on GoJek, where essentially they could leverage our APIs, which Kita Visa, a donation platform, uses, and they have a donation platform where they accept GoPay. And we were able to launch new services that way, leveraging something that already existed that we just had to white label and say, what if it was the same API, but not us doing the work?
Right. So talking more about like a product market expansion, like when you do that, let's say you decide, okay, so there's this one thing you can tweak out of the, 4 variables. I mean, you don't have, it's an adjacent market. It's something that you can readily address. Do you, like as a leader, do you go out and say, okay, I need to assign a different team to this, or a different person, or maybe just a product manager to just focus on this? When do you decide to kind of carve out a role, or a person, or because we have product managers, like a product manager just focused on this, or is this something that you can fold into the existing organization?
That's a
To be
good
handled by
question.
existing people?
I think that every product market fit expansion, if you are not optimizing for supply or selection, you usually should try to expand with the existing resources and do a test. I mentioned the Wizard of Oz being my favorite strategy for things like launching subscriptions, or even launching, I think when we launched our GoPay experience, we just asked drivers, would a customer give you cash? Would they trust you with cash? And would we be able to do a GoPay top up that way? And we didn't create a whole new team around it. We essentially said, what's the lowest lift way we could test this to get meaningful signal and make a call? Because then you have to decide on the level of urgency, the level of effort, level of impact that you believe this will have, and that's always going to be a judgment call. I think product managers, really the best product managers, are hired because they have extremely good judgment. And that means that they're taking into account the right metrics, the right product strategy, market data, competitor data, as well as user insights. And having good judgment means understanding how much do I weigh all of these individual different metrics when I'm making a decision around product market fit expansion. So if it's product market fit expansion, obviously the market data is super important for me to consider. Should also consider if I am neutralizing a competitor, or if I am solving for something that's competitive within their use cases. Then I need to think about what is the level of effort this would require, and do I even have resources to sustainably see how this product experience might fold out. And I do think the companies who want to be platforms where they are doing many different things, because again, not all companies need to. Not all
Yeah.
companies need to be this data driven. Not all companies need to do like 10 different verticals. But for those that do, they need to figure out what their moat is. What is the one thing that they will always be able to leverage and therefore invest heavily in to make sure that that's extensible? Because as Bill Gates has said, what is a platform? The platform only is a platform when the value created from the platform is greater than the value of the platform's revenue itself. So things like Shopify. Shopify earns its merchants way more revenue than Shopify alone earns. That's what makes that a real platform. Amazon, not so much.
So just curious about that. So a lot of the unicorns eventually, I mean, they reach that kind of valuation because they pursue a platform strategy. I mean, they create a lot of value for the ecosystem and so on. Do you think that's the only path to scale up? I mean, to a is a platform strategy, you think, the only way to be able be to grow a company really meaningfully, like reach unicorn status? Like, what are the different paths to growth as well for companies that maybe a platform strategy is not so
No, I don't think so. I
viable?
mean, companies like Netflix. Netflix isn't really a platform. They're not reusing anything beyond like its infrastructure to sell more video, but it's not as if it's selling things on top of its video infrastructure platform. So Netflix isn't a platform yet until maybe they go into like gaming and other verticals. But I think if you want to grow your business, usually the smartest way to grow the business is to be the best at your particular segment. But if it's saturated, then you do need to expand if you want to grow. Again, not all companies need to reach a scale up experience, and many of them actually will fail because they are trying to be a scale up instead of focusing on the core business and making that highly successful. I think it's also more likely that you can get to the level of quality and user love, brand love, doing one thing versus doing like 7 or 8 different things. With GoJek, the interesting part of being our ecosystem was that our expansion strategy was relatively anti-fragile. And what that means is whenever we would expand to a new adjacent market, it actually improved the driver's experience overall. They had more to do, even if that product area was small. So things like logistics or even food delivery or actually grocery shopping as a better answer, it's only something that you do maybe every 2 weeks. And so for someone to try to build a huge business on that was very hard. It's even hard in the US. But because our drivers were already busy with other things, a grocery delivery in the middle of that, 1 out of 30 orders maybe, made sense and it was additive to the experience. So I think that they have to consider what is the right product market fit expansion, which categories make the most sense. Because when you are trying to be a super app, it actually gives you new powers and new opportunities. You can actually build a business on something that was previously not very desirable or interesting to other companies because doing that alone didn't make sense. So you have competitive areas like messaging is fairly competitive, finance right now super competitive. But thinking about if you're already doing fairly well and you're trying to just expand to one new adjacent market, finding something that is growing, that is sustainable, repeatable, that not many competitors want to do, I think is a valuable segment to look at.
Right, right. Going back to our topic of transitioning from startup to scale up, and now focusing on talent. Like, did your hiring criteria or like the kind of people you hired or assigned to leadership roles change when in that transition? Like, are the kinds of people you hire different when you're a
Inevitably.
startup stage or in scale up stage?
Yeah, inevitably, I think when you are a startup, what you care a lot about is can this person execute? Can they get the job done? Can they think fast? Are they creative? And then when you get to scale up, you suddenly have way more responsibilities. In the early days, I think literally the third month that I was at GoJek, the co-founder and I, we started a riot in another city because we banned a bunch of drivers who were committing fraud. Luckily, we weren't small, but we were not so large that it was going to be worldwide news. It was definitely local news, but I think making those early mistakes early on made me realize, okay, there is a level of finesse to the scale up experience that you do have to consider. You don't want to jeopardize the user experience. You have more responsibilities around communicating to the supply side of the marketplace, understanding who's local versus a large majority of the demand or your general user base. So I do think in a scale up period, you do want to hire people who are better at anticipating risks. Because a startup, you're not trying to be risk free. The ultimate failure mode in a startup is not doing anything at all. It's failing to act. And so once you approach scale up, what you also need is someone who understands that, yes, I need to act, but I can anticipate some of the experiences or missteps that could happen here. And I have a plan for how I might deal with that. I know who to communicate it to. I know how to be responsible in following up on whatever mistakes I've created. And so that means having someone who's good at communication, understands how to work with the legal team, communications, PR. So I know that there was a good question here from Pat. How is Kumu at scale up period? We do have lots of scale up challenges now. I think every time we want to test out a new algorithm, we realize if everyone in the user base were to see this new recommendation or this new strategy, it might not work for everyone. And we don't actually want to confuse our users and give them wildly different experiences than what they were expecting. But in terms of our operations team, I think they've been so deep within the community that they almost always know what to anticipate. In fact, most of them are ex-Power Kumu users in the first place. And so and that's even better because you can now just ask the PM or the person on the program and ask them, how would you like this experience or this change? And they already know it. So having someone who can anticipate what risks might come about and scale up whenever you are moving quickly, make mitigating, initiatives, make sure that there are plans in place, you brief the customer care team. Those are the important parts in the scale up. I also think having someone who understands more about the overall growth formula is really important at scale up. Scale up, everyone's doing a million things, and you will never know everything that's happening, and that should be okay. So having people who are okay with that, understand how to prioritize amongst the different things that are happening and what to care about, what to not care about, I do think is really important here.
All right, great. So we're 48 minutes into the hour. This will be this is a great time to ask people to maybe kind of come on cam and maybe ask questions of Crystal. This is a rare opportunity.
How about Turan and Wow, nice username. If you guys want to come up on stage and ask your questions, you can feel free. I'm going to unlock these tiles really quickly.
So just click on the tiles and...
so just click on the tile. You can come up and join and ask your question.
Right.
But if you just want to type it in, that's also okay.
All right. So while waiting, so hopefully somebody comes on cam.
In the meantime, maybe we'll answer...
Oh, there you go.
Hi, Crystal.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Pogshot.
Hello.
Morning. Morning po. I want to. Yes po, Crystal.
If they're level 1 and default, unfortunately. Okay, that's okay. I'll answer this one question that I saw from Turan since he's level 1. So how do you know which features should get prioritized? And what are the factors? Okay, so what should you prioritize depends on urgency, impact, effort. I know a lot of people always talk about effort versus impact, but I think the crucial thing that's missing is oftentimes urgency. Urgency means, is there a competitive strategic play here? Do you need to neutralize a competitor? So for example, Slack versus Teams. I think Slack really messed up not thinking that Teams was an urgent competitor to neutralize. They're like, oh, most people just use it for Zoom. It's not a competitor. And it's like, well, technically, yes. And so there are a lot of problems on just considering impact and effort and not considering urgency. The other thing to consider is how much additional leverage will this feature give you? In terms of urgency, is it required for sequencing? Do you need this feature so that you can launch something bigger in the next couple of weeks? That's an important piece to prioritization. If something unlocks something else or is blocking something else, that generally needs to be prioritized first. And then around urgency, I'd also consider, are we losing customers if we don't have this feature? Is it impacting user experience? It's become table stakes for whatever reason. A big PR thing came out. One of the features that we had to prioritize at GoJek was phone number anonymization. Before, whenever you would get matched with a driver, they would have your phone number. And we knew that we were at a scale where this is actually a problem. It prevents people from wanting to use the app because they're afraid of this one small thing. And so we had to prioritize that. T. Marcarde? Ty, do you have a question?
Go ahead and unmute yourself.
If you do, go ahead and ask. Otherwise, other people who might have a question, feel free to come up. Or, unfortunately, if you're level 1, you may have to drop the question in the chat.
Hello.
Hello. Do you have a question?
I don't.
Okay. Well,
right.
Unfortunately, we're going to save the co-hosting slots for people who have questions. I might need to scroll all the way up to find. Wow, nice.
Oh, there. We have a couple of questions now coming in.
Awesome.
From Roy.
So how do you have tips on how to convince management to invest on building a data team? I wrote a really long blog post on this. Please Google Crystal, Reforge, data, path to data maturity, possibly. I keep forgetting all of the titles because we always test a couple of titles for my articles. But I talk a lot about how not all companies need to actually get to this data science level of being data driven. For some companies, it's just good enough that they have clean data, it's in Excel, everyone owns their own kind of data island. Sometimes that's actually okay. But I think what you want to show is what are the list of questions or operations that the team is currently doing in a non-data driven way? And what do you think the potential impact could be if, at the best case scenario, the data looks like this? And I think making those assumptions, things like on the driver supply and customer matchmaking, we would do exercises like if we were at 100% allocation rate between drivers and customers, what would our revenue look like? And being able to do these exercises tells you like what is the net add, the net positive potential of investing in data. So I think just putting it in the perspective of revenue, oftentimes executives listen to that for better or for worse, unfortunately. Right. John asked a good question. Do you want to go ahead, Jan?
Yeah. We have another question from John Barrion. Have you experienced low bus factor in previous teams?
Yes.
Yeah. And what are some concrete solutions you have?
So for those who don't know, bus factor is if someone on your team were to get hit by a bus, how terrible would your product development lifecycle look? Would you be dead in the water and unable to ship at all? So I think bus factor is super important to consider in any product management team. Bus factor for Kumu actually and at GoJek is limited by having 2 iOS, 2 Android, 2 backend engineers on all pods. And transfer of knowledge is important. Everyone in a pod needs to own the services of that pod. That does not mean everyone in the company owns all of the services, but there are dedicated people and documentation where applicable. So bus factor, I think, is a problem with companies that are stretching their team too thin. And this causes headaches. If you're trying to ship a feature, you're missing a back-end engineer, front-end work is done, they put it on hold, back-end person comes back next week, she goes through the code and she's like, I actually need a change to this front-end API, but the front-end team is already working on the next ticket. Like, I see people laughing in the chat, so I can tell that this is a very familiar experience to people. I think without having this bus factor reconciled for and planning effectively, you end up kind of starting and stopping too many projects, tickets, and that creates too much context switching. So I think structuring the team effectively is important. Hi, Roland. This is our CEO, Kumu. Oh, he left.
He left. All right. We have a couple more questions.
Let's do it.
What one is okay, let me come back. So that one question is, as a PM intern, what can I do to really add value to my team and 10x learnings?
Yes. Call customers. Put together a survey, email it out to your users, come back to the team, and actually go Google product market fit survey from Superhuman Ruppel Vora, I think, and do your analysis that way. Every intern at GoJek who has ever been super successful, it's because they took the initiative to go create a data set. So I would encourage interns, create a data set. Yes, Jay, of course you may come up. And so if you're an intern, the best thing you can do is do stuff that everyone wants to do but doesn't have time to do. So calling customers, finding insights, and then putting together a pitch around, I found this insight, here are some reasons why people might have this problem, put it together in a very nice package for you. You can take this to add to your product pitch or PRD.
All right, we have Jay.
Hey, Crystal, long-time fan. I heard great things about you. I'm really, really excited.
Likewise.
Just kidding, but yeah, I'm Jay. I still am a fan. But my general question is, like, now that we're, we're at the stage that we're really scaling up, right? Some of the features and product features that we have might not fit already in like the plans that we're looking at. It can be, it's generally around, my question is like, how do you deal with legacy features? Hey 93, yeah, but that's my main this question overall, like how do you deal with those things, especially, it can be a tough, discussion, but like, how do you usually think through it, help out the team grow with those changes? Thank you.
Feature bundle is a serious strategic practice that I expect senior level group PMs and product directors to be doing. So if you don't know what your feature bundle strategy is, look at your set of features and do a couple of exercises. One is list out all of your features that you can think of and then start segmenting them. Which ones are applicable to new users? Which ones are only applicable to power users? Which ones are only used by core users? And start thinking through what are the right mix and match strategies of your product portfolio and which ones are either dead weight, they're not adding any value, or they're cannibalizing something else in your product experience. And cannibalizing means they are not driving increased acquisition, engagement, or monetization. It has to be one of those three things. If your product is not, you can't directly tie that feature to one of those core value propositions for the business, then it's probably cannibalizing something else in the business. And your value proposition and feature bundles do have to change over time. And think about a very common example like Lyft. Why do they not have pink mustaches anymore? Well, think about the problem they were solving in the first place. Getting into a stranger's car was kind of a weird, creepy sounding experience. You can make it sound a lot funner and less scary if the cars had a cool pink mustache on it. It served as like a trust and safety feature. But over time, they didn't really need that. Now that they had moved to a more kind of mainstream market, the key problems were no longer trust and safety because, hey, everyone gets into a car with a stranger these days. But instead, the clear thing that they needed was, I need a driver within 3 minutes, and I need it to be relatively cheap. And so they had to focus their product efforts on other things, not building out mustaches on an operations pipeline and sending them out, but maybe looking at rentals. Could we serve the rental car market and things like that? So I do think that we often get a bloated app. Kumu is kind of a bloated app, but the problem that I think we have to solve for is, does everyone know about the features? And if they did, would they use them? Those are very different questions. It's awareness, target audience, how much of them adopted it, how many of them are retained, continue to use the feature, and how many of them are satisfied. So you do your CSAT, customer satisfaction surveys. And I think we've yet to really do that meaningfully on Kumu. We're just starting this exercise, but this TARS framework of target audience, adopted, retained, and satisfied, that's how I might think about measuring my feature bundle strategy and whether or not there are things that are additive or not.
All right. So we have a couple more people who joined. 939.
9398663. What's your question?
Hello.
Hello. Do you happen to have a question? Maybe not.
No.
All right.
Well,
okay.
Maybe we'll have other questions.
So I saw a couple more questions. So these are related to Kumu. So one is, what is Kumu's business model? And the second question was, what's next for Kumu? What's the next frontier of innovation? What do you have next?
Good questions. I don't. Since the CEO is on this call, I don't know if I can share too much about future innovations. We got to keep it on the down low. The business model is really simple. I think as a creator, if you are being an amazing host, like Jen here is being an amazing host, people want to give you virtual gifts to help sponsor you and show their appreciation, show you that they're engaged, then Kumu makes a little bit of money having served the platform and the tech, and then the creators earn a lot more because they're providing the experience. And so I think the fact that Kumu's business model is directly tied to how successful a creator is makes it a mutually beneficial platform. So as a live streamer, you could stream, you could do cool things. I actually met someone who does tutting, which is like finger dancing. I really cannot do it, so maybe I won't. But it was amazing, and I was like dropping virtual gifts because I was so impressed with how they were doing this. It was really neat. So I think anyone with an interesting talent, anyone with time who wants to be an amazing host, wants to share their story, hear other people's stories, should be able to earn virtual gifts or just have a really great experience. And maybe they make some money in the meantime.
Is Kumu hiring? I saw a couple of
Kumu's
posts related to
always
that.
hiring. I am looking primarily for senior folks right now. But if you are looking to be an intern, I don't know, can interns in the Philippines work for free? I'm not sure. But feel free to email me, Crystal at Kumu.ph.
All right. Okay. So how about you? So what's next for Crystal? Are you still doing venture investment? Are you still advising startups? Can people reach out to you for advice if they're in a startup?
People can always try to email me. I cannot promise that I'll reply because I get a lot of emails, but I promise I read all of the emails. So definitely email if you have a question. What's next for Crystal? I'm now working full-time on Kumu. So I'm hoping that we hear a lot more from people. The best way to stick out, if you want to apply, tell me what features you love or don't love about Kumu. Tell me what you would do to fix it. How would you measure that it's fixed? What metrics would you use? Like, send me your full case study. If you can show that you're willing to put in the work and that you have strong product thinking, I'm always happy to chat further with people who invest the time and make the effort to show us what they have skills-wise. So definitely encourage people to email me. I am investing in a couple of companies. Most recently invested in Jago Coffee, which is a mobile cart of coffee sellers in Indonesia. It's been really nice to help these kind of founders at the early stages.
And what's the best way to reach you? So do you want to share your email or just your website?
Crystal
or
at kumu.ph or Crystal at crystalwidjaja.com is fine. So definitely feel free to email me.
Oh, great. All right. So we're a little bit past the hour, but this has been a great conversation.
Didn't realize.
So really appreciate it, Crystal. Of course, the folks in Kumu, I also want to thank the folks at Kumu. So really, really thank you for joining. So again, if you don't know about Product PH, go visit our Facebook group. It's if you're in product, you don't necessarily have to be a product manager. If you're interested in building products, you're in a startup, you're in UX, you're a developer, you're absolutely welcome to join. So this is a open invitation. Of course, check out. So we will post this recording in our Facebook group and also our YouTube channel, so you can watch it later. So this has been a great conversation. Again, thank you very much. We learned so much from you, Crystal, and good luck in this next part of your journey in Kumu.
Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time. Bye now.
Thank you.